Welcome, HCI members. Thank you so much for joining us today for the webcast, A 360-Degree View of Family Leave, Organizational Support and Resources for Working Parents. This webcast is part of our research series of HCI webcasts and will be available on demand and mobile-friendly for your convenience. Hello, everyone. My name's Andy Bateman. I'm happy to be your moderator during this program. I encourage you to follow me on Twitter. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. I'm always looking to engage with like-minded professionals who are interested in learning more about the Human Capital Institute. And likewise, don't forget to follow HCI on all of our social media channels, which include Facebook, LinkedIn, and if you're not following us already, give us a follow on Twitter at human_capital, and you can tweet questions, thoughts, or quotes as you're listening by using the hashtag HCIChat. Today's webcast is brought to you by Kindercare Education, and we'd like to thank them for their support of this important topic within the workplace today. If you'd like to learn more, visit their website at kindercare.com. We're really excited to be partnering with Kindercare. This is the third year that we're going to be releasing research on this important topic, and so we're kicking off today's webcast with just a reminder that today is the launch date of this exclusive research report, A 360-Degree View of Family Leave. It will be available to you in your email inbox following this, and you can also look for it on our research section on hci.org. So be on the lookout for that, and a lot of the details of that report will be the focus of today's program. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk through everyone an opportunity to be familiarized with the HCI webcast page. First and foremost, if you're looking for a PDF version of today's slides, you can find those. There's a button that says Download Slides. It's located to the lower left-hand corner of the screen. You can click that button, and that will open up a new tab where you'll be able to download a copy of the slides. You could also forward that to folks within your organization or your network who aren't in attendance today. I'll give you a tip. If you want to forward this content in its entirety, copy and paste the URL of the page that you're currently on, because that will be the eventual landing spot for the webcast on demand. Now, another thing that you might notice is above that Download Slides button, there's a Poll Everywhere application, and Poll Everywhere is our partner in polling, and we really love the opportunity to hear from you. So if you haven't already, please create a Poll Everywhere account so that we can take advantage of this real-time polling option throughout the program. We'll be asking you to weigh in on certain issues, so just keep your eyes peeled over to the left of the player as that shuffles through a couple of different polling options today. And make your voice heard. We'll be revealing those results in real time today, so we really look forward to hearing a little bit more about what's going on in your own unique circumstances. Lastly, I want to point out to everyone that beneath the player you should see an HCI chat box. This is our method for more informal conversation, a way for you to reach out to us if you have any questions. You can share those in the chat box. You can even have conversations with each other. But just like with any conversation, it's extremely useful for us to know with whom we're speaking. So if you could attach your name to your comment using a dash or parentheses, you could even create a Ustream handle just by clicking on the person icon, and that way we'll be able to attribute the insightful commentary, which is bound to crop up during this program, to the appropriate party. So please don't hesitate to make your voice heard in this way. Now, another thing that you can do in the chat box is call out any technical issues that you might be experiencing. So in the event that you're having trouble accessing this webinar, don't hesitate to shout those out, and our tech specialist, HCI Ben, is standing by to assist, and he'll be able to help sort out whatever issue you might be experiencing. In the unlikely event, however, that you're unable to get that resolved, as I've mentioned a couple of times, you can return to this very same page first thing tomorrow morning and watch this as a webcast on demand at your convenience. One other thing that happens first thing tomorrow morning is you'll get an email which will contain information about your HRCI or SHRM credits that you get for attending this webcast, so just be on the lookout for that if you have any questions about how those appear in your transcript. So thanks. As I move forward with the presentation, it's my great honor and privilege to welcome to the program today's presenters, Patrick McConville and Jenna Filipkowski. I'll tell you a little bit more about each of them. We'll start with my colleague, Jenna Filipkowski, Director of Research at HCI. We are a global association for talent management, and we wouldn't be able to be such without the work of Jenna Filipkowski. She's our principal researcher. She's responsible for providing rigorous, insightful analysis and actionable reporting that helps decision makers drive results. Prior to her current role, Jenna spent several years as a consultant for a sales talent assessment company. And I'll tell you what, Jenna does great work, and if you have any indication, just look at this research report, because I'm sure that it's just another shining example of all of the fantastic research that Jenna produces for the Human Capital Institute. And we welcome to the program Patrick McConville, EVP Corporate Development at Kindercare Education. It's there that Patrick oversees the company's business-to-business activities. These include on-site, near-site services, backup care services, and Child Care Select, a program that serves distributed workforces with Kindercare's 1,900-plus sites. Patrick previously spent 10 years in the private equity industry, most recently as a senior vice president with Partners Group. While there, the firm made a number of investments in the early childhood education space, including Nova Learning, Learning Care Group, Guardian, Busy Bees, and EuroKids. So it's with this really fantastic, well-rounded perspective that we're going to kick off this presentation today on the 360 view of family leave. And with that, I'll hand the presentation over to Patrick to kick us off. Take it away.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Hello to everyone on the line. So I think where we're starting off with today is really how can organizations support the transitions in employees' lives, and I'll talk a little bit about the partnership between Kindercare Education and HCI is sort of why we do this. So for those that are less familiar, we service just over 400 corporate clients through our Kindercare CCLC and Champions brands. And year over year, quarter over quarter, we try to stay in touch with the buyer of those services and also the families that we ultimately end up serving. So really understanding how the marketplace is changing and how companies are partnering with their employees and with their employee families is crucial to how we do business. And I know people will have an opportunity to go through the report. But even learning that, we understand that 40+% of respondents plan to change family-friendly plans, that we will see substantive increases in these types of benefits going forward, and that a big part of how folks are thinking about engaging with their employees is being more employee-centric and taking an active role in personal lives are all extremely important things for us as we think about approaching the marketplace and partnering up with our clients.
Exactly. I'm so glad you decided to partner with HCI in the study, because it is something that is more popular and talked about in the popular press and the news about how employers can support the transitions in employees' lives. So I think it's a very timely and important topic, personal topic for me as well. Just to talk a little bit about the HCI research, we have a tried and true methodology for our research reports, and in this deck today we're going to just call out some highlights from our study, but like Andy said, the study is available for download actually now, or you could get a copy of it in your email tomorrow morning. So we have a tried and true methodology for our research projects. We engage practitioners and thought leaders in conversations to understand more about the topic. We do a research scan, and we also develop a comprehensive questionnaire and distribute it to our members. And for this research, we had almost 300 completed responses, majority of from organization size between 100 and 1,000 employees. And one note, HCI research is produced to HCI members for free, and it would not exist, my job would not exist if it wasn't for you guys who take the time out of your day to complete our surveys. So thank you for that. And one also note here, the study was limited to organizations located in the United States. We found that laws and policies revolving parental leave and paid leave varied throughout the globe, so we wanted to be specific and focus more on just one, which was the United States. And also we know that parental leave is only one part of family leave. We know that family leave occurs for many reasons. It could be for personal illness, illness of a family member, elder care, and also the birth, adoption, and foster care of children. And this research is entitled A 360-Degree View of Family Leave, and we focus specifically on parental leave and how organizations can support working parents before, after, and during leave, thus the 360-degree view. And we broke up our presentation today in those three segments. And first, we're going to discuss what considerations can be made to an employee's before their parental leave starts, and how to develop your strategy for a family-friendly workplace. So before you add, remove, or modify any family-friendly benefit or policy, HCI practitioners should evaluate how it fits into their overall talent strategy for the organization. And what a talent strategy is it's the areas or programs that require investment in order to attract, to retain, to engage, and to increase productivity. And in our research, we found that most organizations find that competitive benefits and compensation, training and development, and family-friendly policies and work-life benefits are the top 3 areas for investment in their talent strategies. And we know that family-friendly policies can help parents balance job responsibilities at home, and they go a long way for making it possible for women with children to remain in the workforce. So Patrick, thinking about the strategy piece and how that ties to your talent strategy, and focusing on family-friendly benefits and policies solely, how are organizations that you work with using them to attract, retain talent, and also to increase productivity?
Sure, thanks. I think first, just talking a little bit about best practices, understanding that Kindercare doesn't necessarily touch all parts of this. The organizations where we see, really it working and the best programs in place, think about everything from before parental leave to during to after parental leave. And we see the family-friendly benefits working in a continuum versus working in a vacuum. So I think first, most importantly, they make sure that those different benefits are speaking to each other and informing how they're delivered. And generally what we see in early conversations with organizations that are designing a strategy around family-friendly benefits, the step 1 is a needs analysis. What do the demographics look like of your organization, and what are your employees asking for? I think too often we have organizations that come to us that want to put a program in place that when we layer on top of a needs analysis, they're actually very much in need of vastly different programs. So for instance, we might have a client come to us that wants to build an on-site center, but because of their demographics, they might realistically only be able to service 80 to 100 or so families at a pretty significant investment, while that company has a very large distributed workforce, and they would be much better off served providing a more equitable benefit for that distributed workforce by partnering up with ECE providers and making centers across the country available for those families. And so, 1, having a strategy around the continuum, 2, making sure they're overlaying a needs analysis, and then understanding what are the big pain points. Is it resources for prospective parents because you have a very young workforce? Is it on-site care? Is it distributed workforce care? Is it backup care to address productivity issues in emergency situations? And then also, just as importantly, how do you bring a parent back into your workforce? And Jen, I know you're going to talk a little bit about that today, but it's everything from understanding how workflow has changed and will change when a parent leaves and then comes back. It's smaller details like making sure a lactation room is set up to be employee and family friendly versus look like something out of a medical office, I think is really important. And then also just properly marketing the benefits. And this goes hand in hand with having the right strategy. But where we see highly successful programs in place, we see very dedicated resource in programs. I'm talking about family-friendly benefits. The worst-case scenario is when it's buried a benefits page in someone's intranet, where some of the companies, for instance, that we work with that we think do it quite well is before parental leave, we have a part of our organization that is dedicated to developing curriculum and assessing outcomes. And we've gone in and we've done workshops with our clients around brain science and the importance of early childhood education for prospective parents, for example. So really engaging their employees across that continuum is a pretty important step in developing kind of that strategy and thinking about the benefits holistically.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about it holistically, I think, is the theme of this research and this webcast. It's not something you could just offer and forget about. It has to be cultivated in your culture and marketed, like you said. So going forward, HCI members, talking about, this is our first polling question, and we want to know at your organization what factors are taken into account when family-friendly benefits and policies were created at your organization. And this is select all that apply. So what factors were considered in terms of when you started to offer your benefits and policies? And we have things like values and culture, the cost, direction from leadership. Did you look at what other competitors were doing? Did you conduct an engagement survey or a needs analysis from your employees to figure out what they needed? Was it the local market? Was it a tool for talent attraction, exit interviews, or candidate feedback? So please respond using the polling option to your left on the screen. But it looks like, Patrick, some of the responses are coming in, and they are mirroring what we saw in the research, was that values and culture and the cost are the 1 and 2 number factors.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting. So in other research that we've done, we understand that company culture is incredibly important to companies actually providing this benefit. So we see a significant drop-off with folks who decide not to provide really any family-friendly benefits inside the workforce, which is really compelling. So 2 things to talk about here is how do you align these benefits with your company culture, and how do you think about the cost or the value of these particular benefits. So on the Kindercare side specifically, if we talk about our services, and so on-site centers or our Care Select program where we're serving your distributed workforce or backup care, what are the things that we're doing? I think first, we're very open to partnering with organizations on the on-site side to branding and delivering our curriculum specific to your culture and your organization. So we have a number of organizations or clients that might be particularly interested in health and food. We can design a food program that is different than our off-the-shelf program. We can design the name and the aesthetic to align with company branding and company logos. And we can modify our curriculum to the extent that, for instance, if we work with an athletic or sportswear company that has a high focus on play, we can make sure that we emphasize the play portions of our curriculum and that that's getting properly communicated to their employee base, and they understand, what we're doing, why are we doing it, how does it align with the company culture and values, and most importantly, what are the outcomes and how are we measuring those outcomes and how are they benefiting the employee. I think the cost of offering the benefit, it's no secret that on-site and near-site care requires significant investment from an employer. And so when we think about that, it's also, again, layering that needs analysis on top, understanding the demographics, how many families can you serve on-site versus serving with backup care or servicing with a distributed workforce program. And so I think it's just important that people realize there are a handful of different options, but also what is the value? And we'll get into this a little bit, I think, later in the study here, or in the presentation, where how are you measuring the impact? How are you thinking about talent acquisition, talent retention, increase in productivity because of flexible work arrangements and family-friendly benefits, backup care being a big solve there? And how are you thinking about how this changes engagement? And so, again, best in class, we see organizations that do this very well. They're very on top of that understand how they bring in executive level talent or really any level of talent through these different types of strategies and how important they are. And we see those organizations in a lot of ways measuring, satisfaction. Was this a factor in coming to the organization or a factor in staying in the organization? We know through all the research that's out there that family-friendly benefits certainly play a large part in that. And one of the things that we layer on top when we think about value is engagement. And so we're huge disciples of all things engagement here at Kindercare Education, and what we roll out to our families is an engagement study around how are you engaged with our centers, and we map that up to how our employees are engaged. And what we can do for our corporate clients is we can actually provide them with insight and the impact of that particular benefit in terms of how their employees are engaged, which, again, satisfaction we think is very compelling and profound because we know that data around engagement is a predictor of future behavior, where for the most part the satisfaction and the outcome surveys are really a look in the rearview mirror. So that's something that we talk a lot about, where first there are different options at different price points to serve your employee base. And then there's also best-in-class ways to measure this and to drive engagement and to really measure the impact on engagement with your employee base.
Mm-hmm. And we saw in our research project that only 65% of respondents that we studied, they do not measure any sort of outcomes for any of their family-friendly benefits and policies. And like you said, the second most common was responses to employee surveys or focus groups. So that is like just getting reactions and feedback. It's not a true outcome measure, and it's more of a rear-facing way of looking at things. So unfortunately, most people aren't taking the time or have the know-how to how to measure the ROI and the outcomes. I imagine that would affect the way they build a business case for building a family-friendly workplace. Do you see organizations having success with maybe building up this the measurement capabilities?
Yeah, and look, I think the number one cause of all of this is really how do you do it, right? So as we set up a strategy around what's the continuum of family-friendly benefits that we're going to provide, what are we trying to measure, what are our KPIs? And I think a lot of people hit sort of a wall around understanding how it's helping with talent acquisition and retention and productivity. And those are really the basics, right? So I think first and foremost, you have to have that infrastructure in place because it is incredibly compelling. It's one thing to read the results in a research study, but then to also understand how it's having a direct impact on your organization is step one. And then as we've put these programs in place in our own company over the last few years, understanding engagement for us is really a very high priority, in being able to deliver that impact on engagement and those results around engagement to our corporate clients has been a big part of our growth over the last few years, because we know higher engagement is very much a predictor of future behavior. And we know that those employees generally, provided the program is managed appropriately, are going to be more engaged, and we can continue to drive that engagement, and we can sort of report those results back to our corporate clients. But I think where people really need to start is understanding the effect on the human capital strategy. So what does your strategy look like? What are the outcomes you're trying to develop, and then how do you measure them? And we work pretty closely with a lot of our clients around creating that measurement and data system.
And I think that measurement and data system would be reflective of the organization itself to help build that business case. But then we also know, say if you're getting started, if there's some research out there on, in general, what is the ROI of having a family-friendly workplace? And there's a lot of research on this topic in addition to ours. And we know that there's a clear benefit of one such family-friendly benefit would be a flexible work arrangement. So flexibility in the when, where, and how work gets done. And organizations that adopt that approach, we find that they have higher retention, decreased stress, and improved health of their employees. We also know that there's benefits and outcomes at the organization level and also on the personal level for paid parental leave. So when there's paid parental leave, mothers are more likely to be able to breastfeed. And there's also, it can reduce infant mortality as much as 10%, a recent study found. And also it increases the likelihood of infants going to the doctor for well visits and vaccinations. Paid leave also helped fathers. Dads who took paternity leave of 10 days or longer were more involved with their children and with child care activities than dads that took no leave. So we know there's actual studies that document the personal level effects of having these types of benefits and policies. And lastly, another family-friendly policies help women who choose to have children stay in the workforce. And lastly, this study from McKinsey found that companies with greater gender diversity had better financial successes. They reported greater financial returns above their national industry mean. So there is a financial benefit of keeping women in the workforce in terms of having greater financial ability. And also talking more about measurement, like I said, this study looks at the benefits of a family-friendly workplace. And in it, we note the differences between having benefits and policies and actually honing a culture where these benefit policies are used and appreciated. So think of an example of a mother who has access to, let's say, 5 months of leave, but she decides not to take it because she worries about the promotion that she's up for. Or the dad who decides to work from home a few days a week, but the manager never gives out a conference line for that person to participate. It's expected that they come in. So it's all about how your culture is. It's about the benefits and offerings themselves, but it's also that organizational work-life support that's perceived by your employees that make a true family-friendly workplace. And in our research, what we did was we developed a measure to capture this organizational work-life support, and an item in our measure included, my organization's leaders cultivate a family-friendly workplace, or I feel that utilizing family-friendly benefits and policies would not harm my career path. So in addition, in our study, we had this work-life support measure, and we also captured 32 different benefits and policies that might be offered at the organization, and the mean number of offerings was 11. And then just to bore you with some technical details around the research, we split these into higher-low organizational work-life support, higher-low benefits and policies, and we see 4 distinct groups emerge. So we have the integrators, which are 33%, a third of our sample, and these are organizations who do have that culture of support and also high number of policies. And they could be directly contrasted with the separators, who have low levels of support for working families and low numbers of benefits and policies. Or you could be the group where you have low support but high policy. So that's just kind of like the dissuader type of organization. So with that, we see that there are better outcomes based on the group that you fall in. So integrators report better talent and business outcomes. They report higher revenue growth, lower attrition of high performers, increased employee engagement, something that Patrick talked about, and stronger talent pipeline for critical positions. So now, Patrick, do you have examples of maybe some organizations who might fit into these 4 different buckets and the kind of outcomes they experienced?
Sure. And I love this because this actually perfectly aligns with a lot of the data that we analyze here internally. And I think just stepping back for a second, if we look at our community centers versus our corporate client centers, all things being equal, you would expect to see higher engagement inside our corporate client centers, because it is such a fantastic benefit for a parent to be able to bring their child to work, to be able to visit their child during the day. You would just expect, again, all things being equal, they would be more heavily engaged. And we see in our own data, especially here in the dissuader box, where we have a corporate client that is providing the service, but the support around it is very low. We actually see lower engagement among our families inside those centers. And so I think really focusing on not only providing the benefit, but more importantly, providing it in the right way is key. And if we talk about that dissuader box, sort of what's happening, and I think we don't see a lot of support in the benefits infrastructure for the programs, and that can be through the delivery of the program. So, for instance, are you using a local provider? Are you using a nonprofit? Are they accredited? Do you know what accreditation is? Right, and I think it's some of these pretty basic but very key questions that people need to answer and understand the difference of. This is an industry, for instance, early childhood education, that has 10% of centers across the country accredited. That's abysmally low. Do you know the difference between accreditation and non-accreditation, which has an impact on the quality and the teachers that are inside your center and the outcomes that are produced? And then also, and this is less correlated with positive outcomes, but are you supporting the facility? Are you making sure that it represents your corporate brand and quality? And I think in certain situations, if you have an unsupported facility and you have a program that is delivering best-in-class outcomes, we know that that's actually a disengager for parents, right? So while the organization thinks that they're providing such fantastic benefit for their employees, which they are, if it's not delivered in the right way, it can actually have a more negative effect around engagement for parents. And I think where we see the integrators, so the great number of benefits and the great support around that. Again, these are organizations that don't vary these benefits on a benefit page. Family care benefits are very much their own infrastructure. And to understand what can you provide for a family before leave, during leave, and after leave. How are you marketing these programs to your employees, understanding that benefits can't shoot out 1,000 emails a month to the employee base? How are you marketing these particular benefits in a smart way, and how are you partnering up with your service providers? So for some of our clients that we would definitely describe as integrators, we'll go in there very early and do workshops on brain development. We'll also do open houses with their employees. We'll do tours of our centers to the extent that they're using our distributed centers. And that's really where we see high engagement, both with the benefits office and also with the families, and that they know that these are really key and important things for the employer in its relationships with the employee. And what it's really about is not putting a benefit up on a page somewhere, but how do you become that partner for your employee? How do you become more employee-centric? How do you get more involved and be a support mechanism for their life outside of the office? And we see just big differences in outcomes between the folks who do that well and understand that strategy versus folks who might just provide the benefit because leadership told them to do so, or because they have to, because they're in a geography where it's a competitive disadvantage not to have it. To really have a holistic program and strategy around how you deliver it is just as important.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that culture, that support, is the relationship with the employee and their manager. So I believe that managers help drive this culture. So obviously HR could do what it can do to market it and make sure employees are aware and managers are aware. But I think a big part of that is the individual relationship, how that manager is supportive of the personal life of that employee. So, Patrick, do you think, what can HR do to make sure managers are informed of the benefits and policies and also are supportive of their employees?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of the things I've mentioned simply around the infrastructure side, so making sure that there's a dedicated space and resource for your employees and your managers to go to understand what the benefits are, having an appropriate marketing program for those. So do you know that you have an employee base with a demographic that's younger, so you're heavier on the before parental leave, or do you have a number of families that are currently utilizing during parental leave benefits, and understanding the differences and how you market to those groups is very important. And then having the training infrastructure, right? So are you properly coaching managers and employees on how to deliver the benefits and to talk about the benefits, and understanding the impact and the outcomes as well. So the data in these research studies is really important and needs to be overlaid with your own data analysis to understand how it affects talent acquisition and retention and productivity and engagement are really the key things to focus on and talking about, and making that information and training available on a regular basis. So it can't be onboard the benefits, have one training session, and then put it up on the internet, and that will be it. And then making sure that the family-friendly benefits, again, and I mentioned this before, are sort of operating in that continuum, that all parts of the benefits are speaking to each other and learning from each other is very key.
Great. And then just to wrap up, what we should consider before parental leave. An important but maybe neglected part, and we talked about this a little bit, is to help managers and understand the benefits and policies in place. So like Patrick said, don't bury them in a handbook or an internet site. Publicize them, train managers on them. Some of the responses from our survey said they would hold monthly ongoing trainings on FMLA and other policies, or have an on-demand video library with this information. So, and market it and use it as a talent attraction tool if your benefits and policies are very generous and you know that they're working. And another important idea is for managers and employees to set expectations for the amount of communication they expect during leave. So I went on leave last year to January, and I told my manager I want to be copied on everything that is related to my work and what I do, and so I'm informed. So I don't come back to work and have all these emails. I need to spend weeks just understanding where everything has been left off. So some mothers and fathers might prefer to have radio silence and don't want to see anything related to work. It's up to the manager and the employee to set expectations for the amount of communication during the leave. And lastly, we found only 40% of respondents report that their organization has plans to help manage the workload of a parent on leave by allocating responsibilities and resources to others. So only 40% actually take the work of the mother or father who's going on parental leave and distribute that across colleagues or hire in contract talent or whatever. So I think that's very alarming. And this haphazard planning for an upcoming leave definitely burdens the coworkers who are burdened with the work without a clear strategy in place, and it puts stress on the new parent, unsure of what's been going on or what's been done, or has 3 months or plus worth of work to come back to in addition to new work. So I think to be proactive and to plan, and also to put some contingency and new work and talent and resources into the place of the departing employees is very, very helpful and helps ease that new stress. And so talking a little bit about what employers can do during parental leave besides just leaving the new parent alone. We talked about the level of communication to expect, but the best way to support mothers and fathers as they welcome a new baby is with paid parental leave. As we know, this helps mothers recover from childbirth and allows moms and dads time to bond with their babies. And we know that those first 3 months or so are very rough, so it is something that's needed. And paid maternity or paternity leave does not include sick or vacation time, but paid time off to care for a birth, adoption, or foster child at full or percentage of child. So it is definitely not a vacation type of leave. And we're all familiar with the sad facts about the United States and paid leave. So we're the only high wealth developed country that doesn't guarantee any paid paternity leave. And we're also only one of 2 that doesn't offer sick leave to workers. And of the whole world, we're only one of 2 countries that doesn't guarantee paid leave for new moms. So this is some charts here from our study, and we found that both mothers and fathers take fewer weeks than are available to them, and most of their time off is unpaid. These are the mean scores from our U.S. sample. And we see that women are eligible for more paid weeks and take more time off for any new child situation, whether it be birth, adoption, or foster care, than men do. And we see that not taking full leave can be attributed to the lack of income during that time, and income during parental leave is often a patchwork of different income sources. So it could be employer paid for a few weeks full, it could be paid partially, it could be through short-term disability insurance, it could be through PTO, vacation days, sick days, or some savings. I even saw that some mothers or fathers have crowdsourcing sites, like on GoFundMe, in terms of help me pay for the time off I spend with my new child, which is unfortunate. And some things we know also about paid leave. So some states have passed legislation that mandate it. So New York, California, Rhode Island, and New Jersey recently did some mandated paid leave. So for example, in New York, we'll bring paid family leave, including parental leave, to the state in 2018, and workers are entitled to 50% of their pay during 8 weeks of leave. So not fully paid, but at least 50% for 8 weeks. And recently, San Francisco, for 2007, passed a law that will allow employers to provide fully paid parental leave, and employers will have to make up 45% of the difference. And one last note on paid leave: we know that gender-neutral policies are more fair and they work best, because we know dads want to take leave, and we see research for when policies favor the moms or the women, you see negative outcomes result. So there was a study in Europe that found that the generous leave policies that were just targeted to women found that women did take more time off, but these women were also likely to be in dead-end jobs and less likely to be managers. So there's almost a stigma about hiring women because of the potential for the long leave. And lastly, we know that paid leave keeps mothers in the workforce. So when Google increased the paid maternity leave, the rate at which new mothers quit dropped 50%. And women who use paid leave are 93% more likely to be working 9 to 12 months after the child's birth versus not, so it helps retain them. And it also helps improve financially. So Patagonia reported that paid family leave and family-friendly policies help triple the company's profits. So obviously, definitely a personal issue, but something that the research does show that it does make sense to have policies in place to cover some of the costs of taking parental leave for mothers and fathers in the U.S. So after they return from work, after they return from their parental leave, have a new beautiful baby, the support and resources for when a parent returns to work. That's what we're going to cover in our last section. And in this last section, we want to hear from you. This is our last poll. In your experiences in HR, what are the benefits and policies that are most helpful in supporting working parents? So what does your company do that you know works in terms of supporting parents when they return to work or after? So if you could type in your responses in the text box to the left of the player there, and then we'll look at them as they come up. So like I said, supporting the workload of the parent on leave, paid time off like we just talked about, flexible work arrangements. We're going to go into a lot of detail about that in a second. Flexibility. Remote work, flexibility. The one thing I saw that was interesting from the research project that someone said treating the becoming a parent or having a child as something to celebrate and not a burden. So some people might see someone's impending departure for parental leave as something of a burden on everyone else. But if you take the time and be strategic about who's going to handle that workload, it should be something to celebrate. So a lot of great responses coming. I see flexibility coming up a lot. Patrick, what do you think about these results?
Yeah, I think flexibility is very much the theme that we see when talking with our clients, and the celebrating and the having the baby versus maybe treating it like a burden. And I don't think anyone would say that their organization treats it like a burden, but maybe unless you're celebrating, sometimes that can come across that way. And we see small things like making sure when they're on leave and if they approach coming back, you're sending them sort of new parent survival guides, which can be fun, right? It doesn't need to be an encyclopedia on how to be a great parent. Mm-hmm. Again, going back to my comment around what does your lactation room look like? How does it feel? Is it sort of welcoming? Is it in the right spot? Are small things, but very important. But flexibility absolutely is what we hear the most in chatting with our clients.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everyone, for responding. And in our research report, you'll find a long laundry list of what has worked for other employees. But I know, Patrick, we want to transition into one specific offering, which is childcare. Can you explain what we found in the research and what you know about this topic?
Yeah, sure. So I think right now, as everyone can read from the page, we don't see subsidies or discounts, backup care, or on-site care necessarily being ubiquitous across the country. For us, we see it being a little bit more geographic, but also cost is a really big, important piece of that. And as folks know, on-site, near-site care is having a facility on site to service your generally headquartered employees. Backup care, for the most part, comes in usage form. So we see our corporate clients purchasing usages for new parents that might have, for instance, grandparents taking care of the child, and for a particular day they are not able to do that. And so instead of staying home from work and missing a day of work, they're able to drop their child off in a child care facility for that day. And I think the ROI around that has been pretty easy for a lot of organizations to understand, as long as you have a grasp on the number of days and hours that you're missing out on because of care emergencies. And then the subsidy and discount program. So for us here at Kindercare, we've got about 1,500 centers across the country, and another 400 sites that service before and after school programs, so a total of 1,900. And where we've seen a ton of growth and a lot of success in the last couple of years are programs surrounded by that. And that can come in different flavors. So we have certain clients that will subsidize or pay portions of the tuition for their employees. And that could be in a particular region, that could be across the country. We have clients that will actually buy seats, or what we call priority access or priority hold arrangements. And we have certain clients that will enter into discount arrangements for their employee base, which generally come in the form of a management fee sort of arrangement. So I think what is compelling is we see planning to offer in 2 to 3 years, only 1% across those 3 categories, but relative to the base, those are actually pretty significant increases, especially in the on-site care. And we're certainly on the right side of these trends. And I think being out in the marketplace and making sure clients understand the investment, the ROI, how to measure the ROI, and the different types of options that are available is pretty key. And then also really making sure that they understand how we think about outcomes, measure outcomes, and the quality of the product that we delivered. So I mentioned that the industry, again, is about 10% accredited. We've made a strong push in investing in quality, both in curriculum and care that we provide inside our centers. Will be nearly 100% accredited across our organization by the end of this year, which is a pretty significant milestone. And again, just talking to parents about what bringing a quality partner in looks like, how that can have an effect on their engagement, how it can have an effect on the outcomes and the parenting of your own child are pretty important things to consider.
Yeah, I was unaware of that stat that only 10% of centers in the U.S. are accredited. So that kind of led to the fact why there's so many wait lists, and it's hard to get into a quality center. I know I experienced that when I was searching for care for my child, but I know if my employer had a partnership with a center or even some resources or information about what to look for, what to choose, or I think that would have been so helpful.
Right.
It's a lot to navigate as someone who doesn't know anything about it.
Absolutely.
So our last slide here is talking about flexible work arrangements, and a lot of you brought that up in terms of a best practice for supporting working parents. And we see it's also the most common, and it's also the cheapest option to use when you're trying to support working families. And the most common policies, as you can see from this deck here, is the ability to change the work start and end time occasionally. So maybe I come in at 9 and leave at 5 some days, or it's 8 to 4 or whatever. And also being able to work from home occasionally and to change the start and work time of your workday daily. So this allows for more fluidity in time management, and important events in children's lives don't have to be skipped by working parents because they do have that flexibility. And one thing I think is important to point out that manager-employee expectations for flexible work should be clarified prior to starting a new arrangement. So I know when I returned from maternity leave, I talked to my manager about what options are available to me, and we decided and talked about being able to work from home a few days per week and what that looks like and the expectations. And that's very important to help clarify the level of communication around that. And I think another point to point out about flexible work arrangements, it does relate to important outcomes. So yesterday I read a study about, they did an experiment of IT workers, and they had an intervention. And the intervention was designed to give employees very greater control over their work time and greater support from their managers. And in this experimental design, they found that those who had this support and those who had this flexibility had reduced burnout, reduced perceived stress, and had increased job satisfaction. So these aren't just nice to haves. These are definitely things that improve the well-being of your employees and thus improve productivity and performance. So I think it's important to call that out. So I think we're going to wrap up here in a Q&A. So Patrick, I'm going to read you some questions, but audience, please respond in the chat box to any questions you have for Patrick or I. But I want to know, we talked about quality in centers, and so I want to know, what role does quality play in the process in terms of identifying family-friendly benefits, in particular, I would think daycares?
Sure. I think first, it's our responsibility to help a corporate client or even a parent. As you mentioned, it's an incredibly hectic process, and you're usually approaching it from not having a great knowledge base around what is quality. So what is the difference between licensing and accreditation? What is in a curriculum? So we have a very large infrastructure here internally with an internally developed curriculum and a heavy emphasis on assessment and outcomes around that. So making sure that parents and corporate clients understand that 70% of brain development happens in a child before the age of 3, right? And what does that mean, and how does that influence and affect the way we think about our curriculum and sort of development phases? I think the first part of the conversation is really educating the marketplace and the parents around these facts and the influence it can have on a child's life. And, so I think from our perspective, we're always going to approach it first from a standpoint of we want to provide a great experience for our families and their children and the teachers, and what does that mean, and how do the benefits of that cascade up to the corporate client, and how does it drive engagement? How do we get our families to view their employer as a partner outside of the workforce? And we know in our engagement work that our most highly engaged centers, by definition, parents will literally say, we can't imagine a world without Kindercare. Or how do we make sure that all of our centers are highly engaged, that we're driving great benefits for our families and for the children, and making sure that we're tying that into our own corporate client relationship is pretty important. So right now, I really feel like we're in a stage of the conversation where we're educating the parents in the marketplace. If you go to parents and you ask them the criteria that they think about when choosing a child care facility, by far and away, the number one piece of criteria is safe and secure. That for us is table stakes, right? So I think there's a big opportunity to elevate and evolve the conversation to, of course, we're going to bring in a safe and secure provider, and we're going to make sure that they have the stamps of quality and approval that demonstrate that. But how do we go above and beyond that? So we're actually going to create an incredibly positive and engaging learning environment and care environment for your child, as we view as a major opportunity in the marketplace, both in our community centers and in our corporate client centers. And we see the conversation starting to evolve and change in that way, with a very heavy focus in the public policy world and public education world on the importance of early childhood education and what we can do to service that.
Great. We have a question that came in for Lori, and she wants to know, do HR organizations typically have someone dedicated to family-friendly benefits?
Sure. So for the most part, today, we see that as the case. And in fact, with some of our bigger clients, they actually have dedicated child care professionals inside their HR organization. So for clients where on-site is an imperative, whether that be for cultural reasons or for leadership reasons, we see actually, significant child care, call it infrastructure inside an HR organization that partners with our organization to develop what these benefit plans look like. So we absolutely see those people in place in the companies that we work with.
Another question that came in, is paternity leave a growing trend, and are some organizations resistant to allowing PTO for new fathers? I could answer briefly. I know from our survey, we found that 34% offer paid paternity leave for a birth of a new child, and of that, 6% are planning to offer that in 2 or 3 years. So 6% are thinking of adding it. So obviously, it's not the majority of organizations that are offering it. And one thing I do note, and I mentioned earlier, that gender-neutral policies work best. So it's not to say fathers get this, mothers get this. It's any working parent gets this, and that increases the likelihood that mothers will take it, and also it's more fair. Do you have anything, a comment on that, Patrick?
Yeah, Jenny, you're certainly much more qualified to answer that than we are. I think more broadly, we see family-friendly benefits growing significantly in certain parts of the country and becoming an expectation with the younger workforce. So I think in a lot of ways, it's a differentiator, and it's a great way to articulate culture and values to prospective and current employees. But we also know that it's a growing expectation among people coming into the workforce.
And I know when I did my research looking at like Silicon Valley and the increased competition for talent there, that a lot of those employers are offering sometimes even unlimited. I think Netflix that is offering unlimited parental leave. And obviously that's maybe a messy thing to navigate, but it's something that we see more of in terms of recognizing that both mothers and fathers want to take time off, and they need the income to support that transition. So please keep your questions coming. Patrick, I have a question for you. In terms of measurement, do you have any advice on to how to build a roadmap to get organizations to be able to measure the outcomes, say if they have a flexible work arrangements or they have a on-site child care center, and how to sell what they've done to executive leadership. So what's the first step into being able to measure outcomes, and how do you build a business case for your executives?
Yeah, so I think, again, high level, so outside of what Kindercare might be doing, how does an organization think about engagement and driving engagement? And so really having an infrastructure to measure overall engagement, I think, is the starting point. And then understanding how these particular benefits, family-friendly benefits overall, affect engagement. And once you have that measurement system in place, I think it then becomes fairly easy to understand, what a flexible work arrangement does for engagement, what an on-site center does for engagement, what backup care does for engagement, what having a call it onboarding for new parents coming back to work program does for engagement. And you can start to see if there are correlations between and among family-friendly benefits and how your employees think about your organization overall. So I think first and foremost, that's the benchmark, right? How do your employees today feel about your organization? How are they engaged? And I think you really need to take it a good handful of steps beyond satisfaction and what that does tell you, and more importantly, what it doesn't tell you, right? Which is what are the indicators that are going to drive behavior in our company going forward? And then I think once you have these programs in place, you can start to separate the results based on who's utilizing these benefits, who's not utilizing these benefits, would really be step one.
Great. So, Patrick, we're coming up on the hour, so thank you so much for being here and being my co-host today, and I appreciate working with you and your team at Kindercare Education. So thank you.
Great. Appreciate it, Jenna. And to HCI, thank you very much, and thanks for the time.
And HCI members, please join us on another webcast. And like I said, the research report is available to download now. And have a great day. Take care.